A blessed day to everyone. Today we are going to present a case study analysis of two countries, Japan and Philippines. We will look closely to their practices, funding, and support. We are going to start with Japan's educational practices. Japan's curriculum outline. It or the Japanese school system primarily consists of elementary schools, which lasting for 6 years, junior high schools for 3 years, high schools for again another 3 years, and junior colleges 2 to 3 years, and colleges for 4 years. Compulsory education or mandatory education for Japanese schools lasts for nine years, or starting from elementary until junior high schools. Public schools have classes 5 days a week. There are also schools that have classes on Saturday. There are also a system called special needs education. It is a system for physically or mentally challenged students to support them to develop their self-reliance and thus enhance their participation. Japanese academic calendar. Their school year begins in April and ends in March of the following year. But most schools adopt a three-semester system. Their first semester starts in April until August. The second semester starts to September until December, and the third semester starts January to March. They also have school breaks. The summer break from the end of July to end of August, the winter break from the end of December to the beginning of January, and the spring break from the end of March to the beginning of April. And in junior high and high school, English is a compulsory subject. But in some school, aside from English, they also allow students to take courses in Chinese, Korean, French, German, and others. So in addition to academics, schools also seek to teach morals to the young in an effort to raise well-rounded, good human beings. Heavier emphasis on moral and ethics education in Japan. So they don't only focus on academics, but they also focus to morals and ethics. Morals is a separate subject complete with textbook and allocated time. So how they take exams in Japan. In Japanese schools, the students don't take any exam until they reach the age of 10. They just take small tests because they believe that the goal of the first 3 years of school is not to judge the child's knowledge or learning, but to establish good manners and to develop their character. Students move up into junior high schools or universities must pass grueling entrance exams. It means that it has sleepless nights just to review for the exams for them to pass. So, going to the Japanese universities. Japanese universities have also begun adding study abroad requirements to their programs and adopting an academia curriculum and semester system conducive to overseas study. For example, is the Chiba University, which made study abroad a requirement for all the students in the College of Liberal Arts and Science, introducing at the same time a 6-semester academic calendar to accommodate it in the year 2016. But in the year 2020, the university made study abroad a mandatory for all students university-wide. It means in year 2016, only the students from College of Liberal Arts and Science had the requirements of study abroad to graduate. But in 2020, they made it as a mandatory for all the students university-wide. And next would be the educational system practices of Philippines.
So next is the practices of Philippines educational system. Philippines have two official language of instruction and communication, which is the Filipino and English. In addition, they use also mother tongue as a mode of teaching in primary level. Next is the Philippines school system. In Philippines, elementary or primary school education span 6 years. 6 years in schooling before they go in secondary education. Secondary education consists 4 years. 4 years in junior high, 2 years in senior high, while higher education span 4 years. Philippine school break. In Philippines, primary and secondary education, they take only 2 months school break. Same also in higher education. Philippines academic calendar. Primary and secondary education begin their school year in the month of June and in the month of March, while in higher education, they begin their school year in the month of August and in the month of June. In addition, uh, in addition to primary, children enter primary school at the age of 6 or 7. Uh, Philippine School Day. Public school have classes 5 days a week, but universities have classes in Saturday, especially for those who enrolled ROTC. In primary subject, grade 1 to grade 3 should study civics and culture, while grade 4 to grade 6 study music, arts, physical education, home economic and livelihood, and social studies. In Philippines, they have only 2 semester, not unlike the other country that they have 4 semester. In 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 Philippines, first semester start in the month of August until the end of December, while second semester start on January and in the month of June. In higher education in the Philippines, ROTC is mandatory, especially in the universities. Universities also have their sport and cultural activities, like, for example, intramurals. And in the Philippines also, most of school did not employ janitor or custodians. Next is the funding of Japan educational system.
Okay, next is how is Japan's school is going to be funded. Japan's school, most funds are came from Japanese government, national government, and prefectural government. For public school, Japanese government pay 50% for teachers' salaries. And there are other forms of funds that they call it capital grants, that it is for specific costs that includes a new building and equipment. While in private schools, teacher salaries, the prefecture's government is paid 2/3 and 1/3 is paid from national government. According to Samuels, Japan's national government invests more for elementary and secondary school, and prefecture's government also contribute to education expenses. So teacher salaries in public and private are both paid from national government and prefectural government. The same from other expenses like in buildings
and other expenses in schools. But schools get more funds from the national government. And the Japanese government spends less on its school than do many other OECD countries because most schools in Japan do not have a lot of administrative staffs. They just have only one principal, one assistant principal, janitor, and nurse. So they only focus on the funding for teachers and students. According to Takahashi, the Japanese educational system aims to benefit all students. So there is an educational funds where this financial supports for the students to their education. And these funds are given by both the private and government agencies. First is the sponsorship. Sponsorship aims to help in any form towards education, and the government worldwide give rebates on taxes if you sponsor for a child education. And sponsors donations is like cash, books, foods, and equipment. Next is the scholarship offered to students willing to go for study abroad, also to those who pursue different study programs. And it is a financial help to pay tuition fees, buy books or an instrument, or towards living cost. There are typical categories of scholarships like student-specific scholarships, athletic scholarships, and need-based scholarships. Next is the education loans that is given by corporate on some conditions, generally towards professional studies like to work on their company once a student is complete their study. And next is the aids and grants provided to students through government agencies, foundations, or various other organizations. But a student need to apply for grants and use for any requirement. Lastly is the part-time jobs that allow students to enroll from graduate programs or research to work on part-time jobs, preferably 20 hours over a week. It will be a help to support their studies. So compared to the Japan's educational system, the funding in the Philippine educational system is from the government also, but only public schools are to be funded. While the private school is financed by household and not funded by the government. Those who can afford, they can send their children to private schools but follow also the same curriculum like in public school.
Next is the Japan Educational System support. The Minister of Education, Culture, Sports, Science, and Technology, or what we call the MEX, is responsible for the education system from early childhood to upper secondary, including establishing national curriculum standards, setting teacher and administrator certification programs, and pay scales and developing requirements for setting up schools. This program helps or support public and private schools to make the school be better. In the universities, the Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology has implemented the Global Center of Excellence program. This program supports leading national, public, and private universities as acclaimed center of excellence in their research and education projects. The program will provide funding support for establishing education and research centers that perform at the apex of global excellence to elevate the international competitiveness of Japanese universities. Next is the University Education and Student Support Promotion Project. This program aims to support effective efforts to improve the quality of education. In addition, the ministry has also implemented programs supporting efforts to develop highly skilled professionals in high social demand, including legal professionals, community medicine specialists, IT specialists, and programs supporting efforts to create an environment to accept foreign students. Another is there's also a program what they call the special needs education that supports special students to develop their self-reliance and thus enhance their social participation. This program has support the special has the school called the special support schools where the types of disability have been admitted to special support elementary and junior high schools. They build this school to make persons with disabilities be educated also so that no one will left behind. In the course of general reform of education, special education was reformed to promote this principle of inclusive education, that is, education in mainstream schools along with non-disabled peers, and in broader sense, education meeting the needs of all children regardless of their particularities in terms of abilities, command of the Japanese language, ethnic, or social family background. Another is the Japan Study Support Program. This is the website of information for international students that is jointly operated by the Asian Students Cultural Association and Venice Corporation. They help international students to correctly understand the current situation of Japan through various activities in the Tokyo metropolis and the Tohoku region. In Tokyo, Japan, they will provide more support for educating children of foreign nationals from early childhood through high school, including by increasing Japanese language classes under a plan released Monday. Next will be the Philippine educational system support.
So compared to the educational support of Japan, Philippines have also supported by the government agencies and institutions. So first we will start on the basic education. Support to school and learners. So school-based feeding programs. The school-based feeding programs found that it is helpful because it improved the attentiveness and sociability of beneficiaries, pupils, and students. The program also promote a culture of care and active participation among stakeholders. Then, the government assistance and subsidies. So, in fulfillment of its constitutional mandates and in recognition of the complementary between public and private education institution in the educational system, DepEd implements several programs under government assistance and subsidies, namely government assistance for students and teachers in private and in public, which aim to increase accessibility and ensure quality of basic education delivered through private and public institutions. So, moving on to inclusive education programs. So, promote the right of every Filipino to quality, equitable culture-based and complete basic education. So, DepEd support for children with special needs. It is best practices that improve performance of children with special needs. Furthermore, children with special needs have prioritized as they train equipped school heads, teachers, and guidance coordinators for both public and private schools with enough skills, knowledge, and academic behaviors. So, in Indigenous People Education or IPED, DepEd also responds to the right of indigenous people to basic education that is responsive to their context, respect their identities, and promotes their indigenous knowledge, skills, and other aspects of their cultural heritage. So, moving on to tertiary education. The Universal Access to Quality Tertiary Education Act, officially known as Republic Act number 1093, introduced for program to support this segment, free higher education for students in state universities and colleges and local universities and colleges, and free technical vocational education training for students in public institution, a tertiary education subsidies or grant in aid for supplies, living expenses and transportation, and a national student loan scheme. So, scholarship programs include the State Scholar Program or SSP, which include full scholarship and partial scholarship programs. The full scholarship programs and partial scholarship beneficiaries will receive 30,000 pesos and 15,000 pesos financial benefits per academic year respectively. So, next. So, in private school, there is an act shall be known as the Government Assistance to Students and Teachers in Private Education Act, establishing a fund for the purpose of subsidizing salaries, private school teachers, and appropriating funds. So, to provide education shall consist of tuition fee supplements for students in private high school, including students in vocational and technical courses. High school textbook assistance fund, provided the student in public school shall be provided a comprehensive textbook program under the Secondary Education Development Program. Expansion of existing educational service contract scheme, the voucher system of the private education student financial assistance program, scholarship grants to students graduating as valedictorians and salutatorians from secondary school. Lastly, tuition fee supplements to students in private colleges and universities. So therefore, we conclude that Japan educational system is much better than the Philippines due to the fact that their educational system is so good. Japan has one of the world's best educated population with 100% enrollment in compulsory grade and zero illiteracy.